There are many ways to die, and there are issues and consequences for all these different ways that a person can die. We were both agreeing that there's no doubt about it. The peaceful death, that's what people intend for. That's the best way to go. By passing into spirit peacefully, everything is going to be easy. The transition from this existence to the next is going to be smooth. It's going to be gentle. It's going to be wonderfully heart-opening and wonderfully, literally enlightening as we do travel from this third stroke fourth dimension into the light. Regrettably, today in our society very few people get this. It's become a luxury. As I was only alluding to just a short while ago, today is a day that a taxi driver went on a rampage and killed a load of people, got a gun out and just started shooting people. What happened to someone who was shot to death suddenly and unexpectedly? It's very difficult, as you can imagine. The soul is literally traumatized beyond belief, because there they were minding their own business, the next thing you know someone's poked a gun at them and they've been shot and they feel the life force ebbing away. It's a shock, it's a terrible experience. Now when a person dies like that, they really do need all the help that they can get. And again, this is a very specific work that shamans can get involved in. There's a particular form of shamanism which I've not spoken about much, which is called psychopomp. And psychopomp is literally a conductor of souls. And what the psychopomp does is they find the person that's had a shocking, violent death, and they conduct those souls who are in a state of shock from their state of confusion. They help them to understand what's going on, and they literally conduct them out of confusion towards the light. I had the very great pleasure of conducting my father's soul into the light only a couple of months ago. He died in March this year. He was on a ventilator and other machines in the intensive care unit, and we were told by the medical staff, we're going to let your father die now, we're going to switch this machine off, we're going to turn that one down, and he's going to die by switching the machines off. And so they did this, and so I watched the machines giving all the readouts of his different heart and blood pressure conditions, and I watched them all dropping and dropping until finally he flatlined, as they say, and that's it, he gone. And at that moment I immediately tuned in, literally seconds after the event, and saw my father's spirit. And it was a very, very pleasurable experience for me, because I saw him immediately see where the light was, and he immediately started moving towards the light, and his spirit went into the light. He was sorted. He had actually done the transition from this physical reality to the non-physical reality completely effortlessly and harmoniously. He'd been on a small amount of drugs, so that's another thing I want to talk about. A person who dies under the influence of strong drugs, that creates terrible problems for the person, because what happens is the person dies out of this world and gets born into the other world, but they are completely confused. They are surrounded by a fog. Now my father had a very small number of shots of morphine, so the moment I tuned into his immediate post-death experience, I just, in my shamanic state, I just blew, and that tiny little cloud of morphine blew off. He immediately saw the light, he immediately went to the light. Problem solved. Complete opposite with my former wife, who died of cancer. She'd had a lot of morphine, so when she died she was completely confused because she was drugged up the eyeballs with morphine. Now bearing in mind I started my shamanic practitioner's course a month after she died, I wasn't able to help her. I didn't even know I could help her. I had no idea it's possible to help people who just died. So I had to wait until I'd done another 4 or 5 months of my course, and we did the section on death and dying, and I learned what to do. And in my practice as a student shaman, my very first piece of work was to conduct my former wife's soul. And when I arrived in the place where I found her soul, which was in the middle world, that place that you only go to when you're very, very skilled with all your guides, then I could immediately see that she was still in the hospice where she died. That's where I found her. She was in exactly the same hospice, and the very first words that came out of her mouth to me were, "Why hasn't anyone been to see me?" And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Her soul, confused with all the drugs, had no idea what had happened. She didn't even know she was dead. Can you get that? Because she didn't. And I had to explain to her, slowly and with detail, I'm sorry, love, the reason no one's been to see you is because you've died. Yes, I mean you're dead. I mean, is you're not alive anymore? Yes, I actually mean that. Yes, exactly. And so what you need to do now is to go to the light. Well, guess what? If the light was over there, she was facing that way. Well, of course you can't see something if you're facing away from it, so she had all the drug, morphine. She was facing in the wrong direction. I had to literally, in my journey, get hold of her by the hand, turn her around painstakingly, then I had to lead her, millimetre at a time, towards that light. She was so confused. So a person who dies in a drug state, that's a difficult one. They could really do with some help. So conducted her to the light, I gave her a little push right at the end and off she went. The sense of gratitude and satisfaction I felt that afternoon when I knew I'd done that piece of work was phenomenal. And guess what the very next thing I did? The very next thing I did is I went ahead immediately and did another journey, another piece of psychopump work for her mother, who died 2 weeks before she died, and I found her stuck in her flat in the downstairs part where the store cupboard was actually. She was also equally lost, hadn't a clue what was going on. I was able to ferry her, shepherd her to the light as well. So when a person dies in a drug state, real problems they could do with some help. If a person dies in a state of severe shock, that's also a problem they could really do with some help. If the person dies peacefully, it's wonderful. And the transition is effortless and painless. Another form of death which has become all too common in our society at least is suicide. When a person feels so hopeless and helpless and desperate that they decide to take their own life. This is actually my very first experience before I was a shamanic practitioner. At that particular point I didn't have any of the technologies available to me, so I was using a very crude technology which was based upon a form of Buddhism, I'm going to call it for want of a better word. A very specific form of Buddhism. And so my best friend, he committed suicide, and I was very upset about this and I wanted to help him. So what I did is I created a shrine and I put offerings on the shrine every day, and I did special prayers for him every day for 3 months, and after 3 months I was able to liberate him from his prison. Because to explain, when a person commits suicide, it's a really difficult number to say the least. And it depends on your view about this. I'll tell you what I found. When I found my friend in this particular condition, I found him trapped inside a bubble and he couldn't see out of that bubble. He was in torment, he killed himself, he felt terrible about it, and he wasn't able to move on. By doing these prayers for a period of 3 months, I was able to help him to move on. Using shamanic practice, I could do the whole thing in about 2 minutes. Isn't it strange how things can take such different time depending on your skills and abilities? It's a very simple piece of work for a practicing shaman. So when a person's dying, taking their own life, the theory is that they are violating a really fundamental law, which is life is precious. And we all feel this intuitively in our souls. We know that life is precious. And so how awful to be that desperate. A view I've come across is that when a person commits suicide, they are given a very fast turnaround in the in-between worlds and they get sent back here, double quick time, and they have to face whatever it was that they were struggling with, only in a more extreme form. That's just a view. I can't give you a right or wrong about it, but that's a view held by many people. I'm really talking about this side, over here on the fourth dimension. On the other side, there are many beings always there wanting to help them come over. So this is why if a person dies peacefully, it's effortless, because there are many beings that are there in the realms where they're travelling to, the light, who are there to help them over. That bit's taken care of always, always. There are beings there to help them to come over. So if you are prepared for death, it's okay. The problem is if you are shocked by not being prepared, that's literally shot or shocked in some way, that's when the problem comes in. If you're drugged, that's when the problem comes in, because then they can't help. And then that's when we need to do what we can to help. And I realise it's very clear to me I've got some work to do tonight. And I'll be doing some work for the people that got shot by that taxi driver. It's something that I can do, so I will do that.